welcome to the Cheer Up Podcast. I'm the host, Kara Hunt, and with me is author and speaker Sherry Swalwell. How are you this morning, Sherry?
I am doing fantastic this morning, Kara. It is a Thursday, a Wednesday, and I'm with you. I'm talking about God. I'm talking about life, and it couldn't get much better than this. Got my hot cup of coffee, and I'm ready to go.
So you've already had your I've had my tea so far. In the morning, I may drink a black tea, to give me just that little bit of extra energy, in the morning. But then as the day goes on, I go more towards the herbal teas because I will have too much caffeine and I don't sleep too well at night. So it's like I'll be tossing and turning and up and down and everything. And I can be pretty grouchy when I don't get enough sleep. Speaking of, anyway, today's topic is about identity. This month's series is about identity. And last week we talked about who are you was one of the first topics that we covered in the March series, the identity series. And this week we're going to be talking about who do other people say you are. And I was just mentioning about how I can be grouchy when I don't get enough sleep. That's something I have found out about myself. And since we were talking about identity, I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. So I've learned that if I don't want to be grouchy when I wake up in the mornings, that Kara needs enough sleep. I know with some people, it's when they're hungry. I don't think that's as much so to me as when I don't get enough sleep. How about you, Sherry?
I definitely fit the hangry category, unfortunately.
And for me, it's when you're hungry, yeah.
And it's that, and it's also caffeine. I have found out last year I quit caffeine. I want to say in the fall, and I haven't really picked it up since. I'll have a cup of caffeine, a cup of caffeinated coffee every once in a while, but 99.9% of the time I'm decaf, and my family thanks me for it. I get so irritable when I have too much caffeine. Like I can't handle that jitteriness racing through my body. And even my bosses figure it out too. They're like, what is wrong with you today? I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. They're like, no, you're not.
It's you. It's you. It's them. It's there. Yeah.
Exactly.
I know.
But I also have to have sleep too. I cherish my sleep. I really do. I hate going through the day where you have I always say I have to have toothpicks holding my eyelids open. I hate that feeling.
Oh, I know, right? I can't. And you know what makes it even worse on my end is that I'm not a napper. Okay, so even though I may not get enough sleep, and my eyes are to that point, like you said, I need the toothpicks to keep them open. And even if I could squeeze in a 10-minute nap, I can't do that because it takes me an hour to fall asleep, So, and then even then it's like restless because I think my mind is still saying, why are you sleeping? Why are you napping? You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do this. So it's like harder for me to nap. And I used to have a friend who was so great at that. Like you and me in our past careers, in case you guys don't know, Sherry and I were both medical transcriptionists for years. And I had another medical transcriptionist friend who was able to take power naps. She could sleep for 15 minutes. And she said it would feel like she slept a whole day. But she could go to sleep right away, and be able to get that full 15 minutes in. And I think back then they called them power napping and things like that. I have never been able to do that. As a matter of fact, I think a 15-minute nap would just make me more cranky because I feel like I hadn't gotten enough sleep, So, and definitely I don't want to mix no sleep with caffeine because, like you, it's that jitteriness. And I already talk fast. Caffeine will make me talk faster. But I love coffee, and every green moon, I should say, I will have a cup. One of my favorite cups of coffee, believe it or not, Sherry, and I don't know if you've had their coffee, is Chick-fil-A coffee.
Oh, yeah.
I love their coffee. It's, I think they use some type of dark blend, and I think that tends to be like the kind of coffees I tend to go towards, with like a lot of deep flavor, and just like a dark brew or whatever they call it. And it is so I can even drink it black without anything in it. And anyone who knows me knows that that's a feat because generally I like coffee with my cream and sugar, and but oh my word, the reason I can possibly have it only once or twice a year is because I don't know how much caffeine is in their regular sized cup of coffee, but I am so fidgety after I drink it. It is almost like it's like a foreign thing is in my body, and it's like I'm just kind of I'm like all over the place. So when I drink it, I want to make sure I'm like home for the day, and I don't have necessarily a lot to do or whatever because it just makes me so jittery. Have you ever? And it's not saying that about the coffee. It's talking about my sensitivity to caffeine. Have you tried their coffee?
I have, and I have to tell you, you and I are so much alike in so many ways, but this is one area where we're different. I am a light roast person. I don't like dark roast. I don't. In fact, I'm one of those people who will take a light roast Keurig cup and brew it twice, and then it's at the peak or the level that I want. I don't like dark roast coffee. And I feel bad because I must be one of the only people who doesn't, because like our church does dark roast coffee. Madcap does dark roast coffee. Like all these places do McDonald's, all these places do dark roast coffee. And I'm like, I have to like drown it in creamer and sugar because I am such a light roast person. I feel so bad, but yeah, I don't mind Chick-fil-A coffee, and I have to tell you, they have a iced coffee to die for. I don't know what they do.
I've never tried their iced coffee. Okay,
you've got to try it. I tried it just on a whim last spring. We had done a family graduation party for my daughter, just grandparents and us, and so she wanted Chick-fil-A, so we went and ordered it. And it was like a 25-minute drive from our house. And so I said to my husband, I said, I'd really love to splurge since we're, having a celebration today, and I'd love an iced coffee. He goes, sure, why not? Just add it to the order. I had it gone before we got home. It was, and I'm a person that sips iced coffee. It was gone. It was so good. So you have to try that. But so yeah, I don't mind their coffee, but I have to drown it in creamer and sugar. And I feel bad.
And how do we know these things about ourselves, right? This goes back to identity. And I don't think a lot of people realize that these little idiosyncrasies, just like coffee, like she's a light roast person. Is that what they call it, light roast?
Yeah.
And I'm more of a dark roast person. Even those little idiosyncrasies in our personalities, it can be part of our identity. It's like she knows what she's found out through years of experience in coffee drinking, years of experience in her coffee drinking, that she prefers a certain type of coffee. I have found out in my years of coffee drinking that I prefer a certain type of coffee. And that all kind of breaks up our identity. No one told Sherry, am I right, that you had to drink light roast only, that was the only one to drink, and that you just have to drink it, right?
Right.
It was a preference. You've tasted them both, and maybe I think there's a medium roast too, right? So
yeah,
you probably
do medium roast, but I prefer light.
You prefer light, yeah. Yeah. So you probably have tasted all three, And you have decided that for me, meaning Sherry, that this one is the one for me. I like the light roast, you know? And you've just kind of, and that's part of our identity, part of the way that we have been created, by our creator with our own little things that we like and that we don't like, you know? And it's just those little things. And so we're hoping that through this series that not only do you find out what your true identity is and where the source of that identity comes from, but to kind of sort of just kind of nail down exactly, who you are by just your own little preferences and things. But today's topic, this week that we're going to talk about is, who do other people say you are? And that's a pretty heavy topic, wouldn't you say, Sherry?
It is, but I can lighten it up real quick. Going along or continuing with the coffee theme that we've been talking about. And it's funny because my sister spoke this over me, I want to say 20 to 25 years ago, and it has stuck with me ever since. And for whatever reason, last week, out of the blue, I was going to sleep and I remembered it. And there was no reason for me to remember this, except maybe God was reminding me so I could talk about it today. But she spoke over me that I made the best coffee in her house.
Oh.
So I lived with my sister for a while. We both moved to Michigan together, and I did daycare in her home. So I took care of their daughter and then eventually their son. And then I ran a daycare out of their home. So I had other children too. And she made the comment that I made the best coffee. And I'm thinking, back then I was thinking, wow, I was kind of going through an identity crisis anyway. I didn't really know who I was. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was coming out of a really bad relationship. I was struggling. And I mean, of all the things that a person can say, she said, Sherry, you've got to make the coffee because you make the best coffee. I don't know how you do it. I don't know what, how many scoops or whatever it is that you do, but you make the best coffee. And that lifted my spirit. And like I said, 25 years later, I remembered it out of the blue randomly last week. And I thought, that was a really hard time in my life, but I made the best coffee.
Yeah. See? And see, when the right things fit you, when you need it the most, when the right things are said over you, when you need it the most, it's life-changing, right? Because here it is a quarter of a century later, and you still remember your sister's words.
Yeah, and I made the best coffee, and I still have confidence in my coffee making, although I still don't know what I do that makes it so good.
Yeah, see? Well, you don't know the secret to your recipe, right? It's like, I don't know what I do. It's just good,
It's a tough method, so I'm not sure what I'm doing right. But hey, it is the best coffee. So come to the house and you'll get the best coffee.
So you get the best coffee. See? And I haven't made coffee enough in my life to say I make any good coffee, so I can't say that. But as keeping with the food category, the one thing that people had always said, and I kind of mentioned this before, is because, and I make my own crust, but it was that I make the best apple pies, and so, but apple pie tends to be seasonal, right? And everything. So it was like, it was just one of those things that kind of gives you a confidence boost, to the point to where you're like, I can enter this coffee competition. I can enter this apple pie competition, and I am going to walk away with the blue ribbon. No one else can do it better than me, right? Because that's how confident we've become because of the feedback that we have gotten from friends and family members and loved ones, who have told us, these things, and everything else. But sometimes in life, the things that people say to us or say about us to try to define us aren't that good, and it is, and that's sometimes hard to deal with. And I just am, along my Christian journey, I have come across a lot of people, and there are a lot, and I guess and I can't even use the word surprise. I guess saddened. No, I don't even want to use the word saddened. But the reality of it is that there are a lot of people who are still dealing with hurt because of the words that people have said to them 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, or even 50 years or more ago. And things that people have said, like who they are. And sometimes those things were negative, but people have carried the weight of those labels for so long that it has kind of defined their life. Have you come across that issue, Sherry?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I don't think a person can be born or live any length of time on this earth without having been hurt, whether
Right.
intentionally or unintentionally. And
Mhm.
I know I myself, and I think again it goes back to what we were talking about last week, how I figured out and I've discovered that I'm a relational person. So everything for me revolves around relationships. And parenting, being a parent is very important to me. And being a good parent, a godly parent, is incredibly important to me. And so I vowed, or I determined, or I decided, whatever, me and my husband together, when we had kids, how we were going to do things. And one of the things that was important to me was how I spoke to my children.
Oh,
And
right.
I have not done a perfect job by any means. And the thing I think that saddens me is that I will say something, or I will have said something, and it will be completely innocent, like we were talking about last week, where relatives would speak things over you, thinking it was cute or not realizing your triggers. And I think I
Right.
have hurt my kids unintentionally. And I think that's part of life. Like, I think that we're always going to hurt people, whether we mean to or not. So that's why it's so important that we don't speak glibly, and that we are very careful with the choices of our words, so that our kids can hear our heart, so that they can know the pattern of who we are and go, oh, you know what? Mom said that, and that really stepped on my toes, but I don't think she really meant it that way, because she's never once in the X number of years that I've been alive intentionally hurt me like that. You know what I mean? So I think we're always going to hurt people, but I don't think it's intentional. And I think when we find out that we have, that's when we have to be like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say that. Talking about your example last week, you were talking about how, people might have described you as chubby or whatever, thinking that it was cute. I've never described our children that way, because they're not. But we have 2 dogs. We got a puppy this fall who needs to put meat on her bones because she's still a puppy. And then we have a 7-year-old dog who has been lazy and hasn't gotten as much exercise as he should have until the puppy came. And so I was walking around this fall calling him Chunky Monkey, because he really was like, he was big. And so I called, but I didn't realize, like, my kids were like, Mom, don't do that. That's insulting. And I thought, yeah, it's our dog. He doesn't, like, as long as I say, hey, Chunky Monkey, instead of Chunky Monkey, he thinks that I'm saying the best thing in the world. I'm calling him the most handsome dog on the planet. But even that kind of a thing, like even that kind of an example, I think that I don't know, I had a check in my spirit that I still need to be careful with that too, because certain children, myself as a child, I guess I'm speaking about myself, that if I heard someone say, Chunky Monkey to my dog, and I'm having an issue with the way I look and I feel, then I think my mind would automatically go to, so do they think I'm a chunky monkey too then? So I think that I have to be really careful in everything that we say. But yes, I think that we speak a lot in our house about speaking life over a situation or speaking death over a situation. And I think that I just think we really have to watch our words, because words are so powerful. Whether you're proclaiming that a person is a great coffee maker, whether you're proclaiming that a person is I don't even know an example. I'm trying to think of something that you would say that would hurt somebody's feelings without meaning to.
That they're lazy, they're a loser, they're never going to be anything. You mean things like that?
Yeah, except those things like would intentionally hurt a person. I guess I'm trying to think of like, so like if you have two children and you unintentionally say, oh, this is my child who is gifted in music, but yet you have two children who love music, then the other one will think, well, I play an instrument too, so I must be horrible at it if they don't even think about me being gifted in music too. Things like that can really set a person up to believe the enemy's lies. He's just like waiting for those kind of opportunities. And I don't think that we need to like walk around on pins and needles, because that's not living real life, and be like, oh, I can't say this, and oh, I can't say that. But I think that we just really need to bring it before God every morning, just like we do everything else, and say, hey, help me watch my words so that I'm giving life and life-giving words to those that I love, instead of death-giving words unintentionally.
Right. And I think that's the key. And it's because, like you said, so many times we probably say things that, unintentional, that may or may not hurt, especially if you're just thinking about in a household, may hurt someone else's feelings. And I only had two boys growing up, so, I mean, two boys growing up. That's not correct. That's not a correct statement. I mean, because the way it came out, I have two boys, who are now young men. And they're about 6 years apart, 6+ years apart. And so what I would say to the older one would necessarily reflect on the younger one, because whatever the older one was dealing with, the younger one was kind of miles away from that, right? But I can't imagine what it's like when you have like 3 or more kids and they're kind of close in age. It seems like you say one to one thing, you compliment one on one thing, and then the others may feel kind of left out, right? And everything else, because one may be a great artist, the other 3 may not be that good of an artist. And so I can see how walking that type of, on glass and eggshells like that, sometimes can be kind of draining. But at the same time, you're right, we have to watch it, because we never, it's like a fine line. Am I right? It's like a fine line. And so I couldn't even imagine what it would be like with kids who are all close together in age and kind of had the same activities and things that they like to do. It'd be different if they were drastically different. They all had very different things that they were great in. And because then, one could be, oh, you're excellent in math. You were so good. You're my mathematician. Then someone else was, a great musician, and, you're like, you're the best flutist ever, and then someone else was great at baseball. If it was that fast, I could see that, but I don't know. It just seems like, I just can't imagine how hard that must be as a mom. For those of you out there who have kids who are kind of close in age, and you have a couple of them, and, how to kind of, build one up without putting the other one down. So it seems like it's really one of those issues that you really have to walk a fine line with.
Well, and you also don't want to, we don't want to do the trophy philosophy either, where everybody gets a trophy. No, that's not fair.
Yeah.
You should celebrate each person. Like our pastor, I can't give credit for this, but our pastor came up with this really great idea, and he calls it the red plate. And so in their family, anytime a child, and I think that parents should be included in this, anytime that a child or a parent does something well, then they get to have the red plate for that meal. And they get to either, I don't know if they necessarily get to pick what the meal is, but they just get to be acknowledged and recognized that something good happened that day. So maybe that type of an approach would help with the whole comparison thing, because I can't imagine that both people, even if like you have 3 musicians in the family, I can't imagine that all 3 of them would be in the same grade or in the same competition or the same whatever. So you would be able to acknowledge them separately. I don't know if that would help.
That's a neat idea. That's a neat idea. Yeah, a couple of years ago, I used to watch a program on think it was on a Christian television network. I have to double check, but I think it was because it surrounded. It was about the Bates family, and I think I got the name right. But I think their last name was Bates. But they had like, I think like 20 kids or so. Kind of like the Duggars or whatever, but just but not. They had about the same amount of kids. Though is what I'm trying to reiterate. But I remember one thing that they did for their birthdays. When you have like that many kids, it's kind of hard, to kind of like acknowledge and set everyone apart. But I remember one of the things that stuck out to me, and it's been a couple of years since I've seen the program, but it was like on a kid's birthday, every member of the family, all 18 or 19 siblings, plus mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever else was there, would all go around the table and talk about and talk about one thing that they loved about that person whose birthday it was. And I just always thought that was like a great idea, to just be able to do that. And like you say, speak life, to a situation, and just having your whole family, of course it's a big family and everything. And so but if you get one good thing that person, that your sibling says about you, and you, especially if you have a whole bunch of them, that really makes you, to me, that would be such an awesome birthday present. Forget the gifts, right?
I love that. I absolutely love that. They say that it takes 10 positive statements to undo. I think it's 10. Anybody who knows the real thing and you want to correct me, feel free. But I think it's 10 positive statements to one negative statement. In order to wipe out the one negative statement in your psyche, it takes 10 positives. How awesome is that? I mean, like my sister, if we were sitting around the table and I had 20 siblings, she could have said right then that I made the best cup of coffee or the best pot of coffee. And I would have remembered that for life, which I did remember it for life. But how cool. I love that idea. I love it.
Yeah.
We do birthday letters. I learned this from a man named Kent Julian. He has his own website and he's a renowned speaker. He's amazing. And he always would give his kids a letter on their birthday, speaking life into them, putting a blessing over them. And so I do that with all of our kids. I started when I found out about him, which was 2011, I think. So I've been doing it for 10 years this year. And
go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I know that I enjoy doing it because I get to look back over their year and I highlight the different things about it, things that maybe I'll forget to say or things that maybe I'll forget to acknowledge during the year because life gets so busy and crazy sometimes. And I hope that it blesses them. I really do. I hope that they realize that it's not just words that mom's filling a page with, but it's words that we mean and that we want to speak over them because we're proud of them for this. And I always end the letter with, there's nothing you can do that would make me love you more. There's nothing you can do that will make me love you less. And it's so true. But I think that is a reminder that needs to be given, that it's not what you do in life. It's not who you are in life or what you accomplish in life that makes you lovable. It's the person that God created you to be. That's who we love. The essence of you, not what you can accomplish, not what you choose not to do.
Exactly. And I think that that's the core of identity, is the essence of you, the essence of who you are. Because sometimes we can react and do something, but it's not really who we are. It's it's just like a gut reaction, because life has told us that we need to react that way, or our life experiences up to that point has told us that we need to react that way, or else we're either going to get hurt or or something along the lines. But that's not really who we are, necessarily as a person. And so I think going back to, just the essence of who you are and the essence of who God can show you to be. And we talked about that a lot in the previous episode titled Who Are You? And so if you guys haven't heard that particular part of the episode, just go back and get it. And it really goes into who God kind of talks about who God says you are and how to find out exactly, who you are. And when it comes to what other people say to you or say about you, hopefully they'll probably say, oh, she's a wife, she's a mom, she's a writer, she's an author, she's a speaker, she's an artist, she's a musician, they could go on and things like that. Those would be good things to say. But what if they say something negative? What about those people out there, Sherry, that have had just negative, not life-giving things said to them over their life, and they're still struggling with it?
Well, I can share a personal story with you. So I've shared on here many, many, many times about how God has freed me from depression, how He's freed me from fear, how He's freed me from anxiety and panic attacks. And when I was in the throes of them, when I was in the thick of them, I didn't know how I was acting. And I didn't realize that my reactions were how they were portrayed by other people, because I was just in survival mode. And I didn't even realize I was in survival mode until after God had delivered me and healed me. And I looked back and I was like, wow, that was pretty bad. Like that affected every single area of my life. Well, I had a conversation with somebody a little while ago, and they were bringing up a lot of things from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and bringing them back to my attention of how I had hurt them, or how I had reacted in this way, or how I had done this, or how I had done that. And, because God had brought me through what He brought me through, and because of my relationship with Him, and because I knew who I was in Him, I was forgiven. Had I made mistakes? Absolutely. Had I done things wrong? Absolutely. Was any of it intentional? No. I was in survival mode. I was just trying to get through the day. And because God had brought me to the place that He did, and I knew who I was as His child, I was able to say I was sorry. I was able to forgive. I was able to let go, and I was able to move on. Did it happen overnight? Absolutely not. Because Satan, he still loves to get at me. And he was like, see, you're no different. See, you haven't changed. See, you're still that same person. And I had to keep reminding him, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Did I realize at the time that I was hurting other people? No. But did I apologize and make it right? Yes. Is there anything else I have to do with this? No. I just have to move forward and continue to be the person who God called me to be now, who He called me to be back then, but I wasn't able to be it back then. And so I think that it would have been a very, very different conversation with those people, with that person, had I not been grounded and grown so much in who I was in Christ. I think I would have, I don't know if I would have been able to apologize. I don't know if I would have gotten defensive and lashed back out. I don't know what I would have done, but I know that God got the glory in that conversation, because I was able to keep it focused on Him, forgiving like I was supposed to, asking forgiveness where I needed to, and not staying mired or dwelling in the muck and the mire that I had been in, and that Satan was trying to pull me back under in.
And it's true. And it's like, we have to be so very careful, because like you said, sometimes our initial reaction could be very defensive, very, very defensive. But we constantly are going to have those people in our lives that is going to remember. I used to say, those are my BC days, like before Christ days. But it's like,
Exactly.
but they're going to, because they still remember it. And And when you were talking, it reminded me of Romans 6:6, where it talks about how, for we know that our old self was crucified with him, so that the body ruled by sin might be done away with. So that old self that someone keeps bringing back up because we're believers now, we're AC after Christ, so to speak. That person doesn't exist anymore. That was crucified with Christ. He took that on. It was all taken care of at the cross. That person literally doesn't exist anymore, you know? And it's like, and so they bring it up, and we're not trying to be mean or anything like that or dismissive of what we said or their feelings, but it's like we have a hard time connecting with it because we're not that person anymore. And you know what I really also feel like that the Lord has shown me is that when that person keeps bringing it up, not if someone brings it up necessarily one time, but more than once, that's not my healing to deal with. That's their healing. That's something that he's going to have to deal with them personally. Yeah, if you understand what I'm saying. If they keep bringing it up, that means that they are still hurt. That means that they still have an issue with it. They still have umbrance with it. They still feel like either A, we should pay for that, or we should maybe apologize for it, even though we've already done that. But they just keep bringing it up over and over and over again. And they're dealing with unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment sometimes in some cases, depending on how bad we intentionally, unintentionally hurt them. But that's their time for their healing to take place. So it's like we can't even really get mad at them or get defensive because what happened happened. But they just need to be open now to God healing him the way he's healed us, if that makes any sense. And it's like they are the one at that point that needs the healing, that needs the touch of God. That needs him to chisel away and sit in the hot mess like we talked about in last week's episode, to sit there and to just sit there and admit, how can this person move on? God, how can you even love them? How can you forgive them? Do you not know what they did to me? Do you not know what they said to me? Do they not know that what they said today still haunts me? And they moved on, and you've accepted them as your child, and they're like, it doesn't even matter to them? Like, God, how? Because I'm still mad. I am still bitter. I'm not going to forgive them. I have no intention of forgiving them. And please don't ask me to forgive them. As long as they breathe, I want to remind them how much they hurt me. And that's sitting in your own mess, sitting there and just letting it do that. And you let God deal with that. Because all of those feelings are real. But you constantly lashing out at that person will not bring healing. As a matter of fact, it's just going to turn up the water hotter in the pot that you're sitting in. It's not going to make, because the more that person is just like, I am sorry you feel that way, and everything else, and you're just feeling like you're not getting from them what you want from them, it just makes you madder. It makes you more emotional. It brings more tension, and you're more resentful and bitter than you were when you enter the conversation because you still feel like you haven't gotten what it is that you needed. And chances are, most times out of not, what we want is not necessarily for them to apologize. We want them to take it back. We want them to undo. We want a do-over. We want it to have never happened. We want it to be erased. And that is not something that the person who offended you or hurt you can ever do. They can't do that. As human beings, children of God or not, that is not something that we can or have the power to do. That is something only God can do. So when I say that it's a healing that they need to deal with, I'm saying that with all sincerity, because what you really want from that person is something that they'll never be able to give you. Sorry is not enough. Apologies are not enough. Groveling, begging is not enough. You want more. You want something that they can never give you. And that is something that only God can heal and take away from you. He is the only one that can do that. You want a new life? You want regeneration? You want to make it like it never even happened? Let God do that. He can do that. He can heal you so thoroughly that you will sometimes completely forget that it even happened. And that's really what you're after. But the person you're attacking will never be able to give that to you. They won't. And I think once we acknowledge that, is when we can truly have such a true healing in our peace, and then we can go about and let God continue to show us his our identity and the future that he has for us. And a lot of times the things that people say, especially for those who have grown up with parents who constantly said negative things about them, like we were talking about earlier, loser, lazy, or even worse, right? The list can go on and on and on. And you may be 50 plus years old and still dealing with some of the things that a lot of those people say. And you're like, well, that was my mom that said those things. That was my dad who said those things. I mean, if anybody should know me, it would be my mom and my dad, right? So obviously there's some weight to what they're saying. If they say I'm a loser and I'll never be anything, then obviously it's the truth. It's a lie. And it's a lie from the pit of hell. Because you want to know who knew you before your parents knew you? God knew you. How do I know that? Jeremiah 1:5 tells us that. It says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I knew you. I set you apart. So before your mom and dad even came together, God knew you. He's the one who knows you better than your mom and your dad, your sister, your brother, or anyone else who you give a lot of weight to the things they say about you. Before you even took your first breath on this earth, God already knew you. He's the one that gets to define you because he knew you. He knew you before you even in your mom's womb. He knew you. He's the one that can say those things. So if you're going to attach weight to words that anybody has said or spoken over your life that are not life-giving and life-fulfilling, then go to what God says about you. He knows you better than they do. He knows your heart better than they do. Our parents, as much as they probably more than anyone else in the world would know us, since they have known us since we were cradled in their arm, they don't know us more than God does. And that is where you get your true identity from. So no matter what others say about you, especially if it's not good, if it's not life-giving, and it doesn't encourage you and or inspire you, then you have to go back to the source and say, why am I believing what this person says? I know that they're my mom, that they're my dad, that they're my sister, my brother, my aunt, my cousin, my grandmother who raised me. But is that really who I am? Is that all I'm going to be? Am I never going to be good enough? Because they say I'm never going to be good enough. Am I never, how does that work? But see, you go to God, and he's the one who knew you before all of that, before we even did anything, before we took our first cry even. He knows us. He knows us better than anything. And if he says that you have a purpose, if he says that you're his child, if he says all these great things about you in the scripture, then that's what you believe. And he calls you his child. You're part of a royal family. And that's just one of the things that God says about us and our identity. So it's just when things like that, and for those who are just struggling with those negative or are haunted by those negative things in life about what people have said about us, it's best to just wash it away and just remind yourself who God says you are. And he says that you're loved, and he says that you're precious. He thought you were so precious that he was willing to die on a cross for you. And I think a lot of times, and Sherry had mentioned in a previous podcast how sometimes people say things like they would tell her, you're a daughter of the king or something like that, but she didn't really know it and embrace it quite because she didn't know exactly what that meant. Get in the word, sit down and just spend time with God and talk to him about everything, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And he will be able to show you, who you are and who he says you are and who he designed you to be, not the negative things that a lot of those other people have said you to be. So is there anything you want to add to that, Sherry?
I think that you hit it right on the head. I think that was perfect. And it goes back to last week I mentioned the verse, and I couldn't remember the reference, but it's Isaiah 43:1. I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. Like, let those words sink in. He calls us by name. It says somewhere else in the Bible that God has a special name just for us, and I believe that it says that he will reveal that to us when we get up to heaven. Like, I cannot wait to find out what name he has for me. Like, names are incredibly important to me, and I love the meaning behind names. And to the thought that he has a whole new name for me that he picked out himself, maybe it will reveal more about who, my real purpose in life. Maybe it will reveal more about my personality. I have no idea. I don't know. It's just an exciting gift that I feel like I get to unwrap whenever it's my time to go up and meet him face to face. But I agree with Kara. I think that we can get really wrapped up in who people think we are. And I could have had a really rough time having that conversation that I shared about, had I not known, had God not grown me the way he did, had I not known who I was in him, and that I could separate the lies from the truth. Had I hurt those people? Yes, I did. Did I feel horrible about it? Yes, I did. But was that who I really, truly am? And is that who I was today? No. And that's all because of God and who I figured out who I was in him. And the more that we immerse ourselves in finding out about God, and the more that he reveals about ourselves to us, the more we're able to offer that forgiveness, the more we're able to be less defensive and react with our gut. Instead, we react with our heart. The more we're able to react in love and grace. Oh, grace upon grace upon grace. God is so gracious to us. And when we really grasp that, that's when we can then share it with others. So that goes into what we're going to talk about next week. And that is why knowing who we are is so important. If you're interested in that question and you want to keep going with our identity series, please come back next week. And we're going to dive into that one. John 16:33 says, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit are just utterly so amazing. And the fact that our Father loves us so much that he sent his son to die on the cross so that we could have a chance, we could make that choice to live in eternity with him, and then not to leave us alone here on earth while we wait to go up to them, but to give us the Holy Spirit to live inside of us and to give us that boldness and that courage when we find out who we are, is just utterly amazing to me. I mean, what a blessing. And he gives it to us simply because he loves us, not for any other reason but that. If you're sitting here going, okay, you keep talking about, I'm a daughter of the King, I'm a daughter of the King, I'm a son of the King, of the Most High. What does that mean? I want to be one too. If you've never prayed and asked Jesus into your heart, today we're going to give you that opportunity. If you want to become a daughter of the King or a son of the King, if you want to start that relationship with God, today's your chance. So all you need to do is pray along with me. Oh, Heavenly Father, I come to you in Jesus' name. I believe you died on the cross and that you rose again, and you're seated on the throne. Jesus, forgive me for all that I have done wrong, and I choose to forgive all others. Come into my life today and forever. I am yours. In Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed that prayer with us today, welcome to the family. Welcome to figuring out who you are in Christ. Welcome to that relationship of figuring out who God is and who he is in relation to you, and how he wants to be so much more than just a distant God up in the clouds. He wants to be a personal God sitting right next to you, holding you in his hand, calling you by name. If you prayed that prayer and you want to, share it with us on the Facebook group, Cheer Up Podcast. Otherwise, if you want to do it more privately and you want prayer or encouragement, come over to cheeruppodcast@gmail.com and drop us a line. You can visit Kara at her website, KaraRHunt.com, or my website, SherrySwalwell.com, CherisSwalwell. We are so glad that you joined us today, and come back next week to find out why knowing who you are is so important. Until then, have a great rest of your week.